Hello and welcome. My name is Dick Forbes.
And I'm Cindy Smith, and I'd love to welcome you to Today's Families. Today's Families is where we talk about things that affect the family, affect the mom, the dad, the children. And today, it's a pretty kind of a hard topic, but I think it's very important that Dick has come up with. Dick is a counselor here in our community in Cartersville and is very gifted. So it's very exciting to be talking to you today, Dick, about a difficult subject called relationship infidelity and why does it happen in marriages. Why do people have to commit adultery, as you say? Look outside the marriage for fulfillment.
Right. And over the years that we've done this show together, Cindy, I can't remember us ever doing one on this. Do you?
I don't.
Yeah. So, and it goes way back. So, and again, it's more prevalent today than I think than ever before. A question I always ask when a couple comes in and there's been an affair, I'll ask, and this isn't to be mean or anything, but I'll ask the one who had the affair, what gave them the right to do that? And just about everybody, almost 100% will say that they didn't have the right to do that. And I think it's a good question to ask people. If I know I don't have the right to do it, then why do we do it? And that's kind of what I want to explore today on today's show is, what motivates people to do this? We all may see an attractive person during the day or, think, they're really pretty or he's really handsome or whatever it may be, but we don't cross that boundary. We don't cross that line. And so, but what is kind of the catalyst that people that do cross that line is kind of what we're going to look at today. And we got about 8 reasons why, and there's probably more, but this is the one that I think that are probably the most dominant of everything. And that first one is just flat out anger. I'm just angry. And I would say that probably most people that come in that have an affair, I would say this is probably the number one motivating factor. And so what are they angry about? Mistreatment. They haven't worked on the marriage. They've been neglected. There's just, a lot of reasons. Somebody controlled me all their life, or they were overly critical of me all the time. And so it just creates that resentment and bitterness in a person.
Does that come, in your studies and in your experience, does that come at a certain time in a marriage, like after 1 year, 2 years? Is there an average?
I don't know that there is or there isn't, but the ones that I find that's been the case where the anger has built up over time.
That's what I was thinking. It was kind of, after it's had time to see that the expectations haven't been met.
And that's a key word.
Yeah.
And I would say too, you get into a fight into a couple, you don't run out and have an affair, but it's over time. It's those small things over time. I love that verse of scripture in the Song of Solomon where it says it's the little foxes that spoil the vineyard. And what is that? Well, the foxes would run through the vineyard and the low-hanging fruit with their tail would spoil the grapes. And so the same thing is true in marriage. It's not the biggie that typically destroys. It's what led up to the biggie. And so to think, well, the affair is the problem, now, usually you got to peel back the onion a little bit and you discover a lot of other problems that lie below it, which leads to the anger over time.
So when there is an affair, there's a sign that there's something wrong, and it could be any of these motivations behind the affair. So anger is probably one of the first ones we think about.
And I think it's probably the number one reason.
Would that be like to seek revenge? Or?
Sometimes it is. Payback.
It's a private thing. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's a way of getting out of the marriage. Let's go take the gun and blow our big toe off. What better way to do it than to go out and have an affair with somebody? And a lot of times, when couples come in, and I'll mention this about anger. Well, I'm not an angry person, but the more that we talk, the more we discover why. They may not be putting their fists through walls or throwing dishes or anything, but there's a subtle burn below the surface right there many times.
Exactly, and that's what we're looking at today is motivation. So anger is a huge motivation behind an affair for a man or a woman.
Right,
either
many
one.
times, yeah.
So the second one is esteem. That's an interesting one.
Well, some people, they may be in the relationship with their marriage and they just, they're just not getting the affirmation and being built up and being, nurtured and, not felt, that they're being built up. And yet, so they go out and find somebody who sings praises about them all day. Well, you're the greatest thing in the world, How could somebody not love you, and this kind of thing? And so it's like a drug. It's like a cocaine with some people. It gives them a high, it gives them a rush that's there. But the downside, if I go into it with esteem issues, that person who's building me up, it'll eventually fade over time, because that person cannot keep up that level of intensity for so long. and so my esteem is always going to be looking for something to build me up. And it's not fair to put that amount of weight on another person to do for me what they really can't do for me in the long run. They can't over time.
So that esteem is a huge thing that if anybody resonates with that, that is something that can be fixed, that can be helped, as well as the anger.
Right. Yeah, everything we're talking about is fixable.
Yeah.
$1 million question.
So this is to kind of give hope too,
Right.
Maybe it's a learning, but it's also to offer hope.
Sure.
So what about a lack of love?
Well, when you're dating, what's going off inside of you? You never felt like this before. There's that euphoria, there's that intensity, there's that passion that you feel for this person. And but it's not sustainable. Intensity is not sustainable. And this is where I find a lot of people don't know how to transition from intensity to true intimacy. And true intimacy, and I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about the head and the heart stuff. True intimacy is even better than intensity. And where people get stuck is they don't feel that intimacy with the other person, and so they feel the lack of love. And to be honest, Cindy, most of us get lazy in our marriage. We take the other person for granted. We quit doing the small things. We quit, leaving love notes or just doing kind acts for the other person out of our own care for that person. I remember, you remember Dear Abby?
Yeah.
Remember her? And I cut this article out years and years ago, and I don't know what I did with it, but this woman writes in about her husband, and she's just tearing him apart. He doesn't remember birthdays, he doesn't remember anniversaries, he doesn't remember Valentine's, he doesn't remember anything. And so, Dear Abby always had a counter letter. So this other woman writes in and says, that her husband doesn't remember birthdays, anniversaries, and those biggies. But she goes, I don't care because he treats me so well every day of the year. There's the difference, because those 4 or 5 holidays or special days during the year don't make a marriage. It's what goes on the other 360 some odd days a year that make the marriage. And so the lack of love is just not constantly having, FaceTime or couch time all the time. It's just those small acts of kindness that take place in and out, day in and day out. And if I don't do those things, then I'm setting myself up. I'm ignoring what could become that predictable disaster that we talked about in the past.
I really, really appreciate your teaching on the intimacy versus the intensity. I love that, because I think it takes the intensity to get a relationship going. Right. But it takes the intimacy to keep it going. Right. And so I wanted to ask you about this, the motivation for an affair. It might be lack of love, but it says, I was not sure if I really ever loved my primary partner or my husband or wife. I was not sure if my husband or wife was the right person for me. So you go to those thoughts, and those thoughts lead to, oh, well, if they weren't, then I can find somebody else. Right.
And I think they didn't transition. Neither one probably transitioned at that point. There wasn't that ability to go from that intense passion and, can't wait to see you, can't wait to suck face with you, and all that kind of stuff, until it just didn't transition. And so it's a level of immaturity, I think, too. When you're in high school and the intensity goes away, well, I don't love you anymore. Because they expect that high to last and go on and on and on. And, movies don't help, TV shows don't help, Harlequin novels don't help, because they're all about intensity, and life's lived that way, right?
Wow.
Not really.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, to have the long haul and to get to the 35, 45, 50, 60 years of marriage, it takes that transition for sure. And I think that's such a good thing to bring out again. Yeah, that's so good.
I remember Jackie and I were at dinner, this was a while back, and there was this elderly couple I could see, and they weren't talking or anything, but they were waiting on the food. And when their food came, I saw the husband reach for the salt and pepper and shove it over to her immediately. Well, does anybody notice that? Not really, but it's a simple act that he said, I know how you like your food. I know you like salt and pepper on your food. And so, it was just, to me, it was a very kind act of something simple like that.
Wow.
I mean, he didn't grab it and do his and then put it back. He just
He
gave
thought
it to
about her first.
Right.
So what about the fourth motivation? It could be low commitment.
Mm-hmm. This has happened 1 foot on one side of the fence and 1 foot on the other side of the fence. To make a marriage work, you've got to be in completely 110%. You can't have this, well, if it doesn't work out, we can get divorced mentality. And a lot of people, it's unbelievable to go into marriage thinking that. Even in dating relationships, I'm not sure. Well, that's fine, but as long as you're honest with the other person, that, I'm about 70% there, but I'm not full 100% there yet. And, I may have, I may want to date other people, but you can't do that in marriage. There has to be a full commitment to it. And, in working with couples, I tell them from day one, I say, you've got to show up with your A game every day. You have to do this 100% every single day. If you're going to fix the marriage, if you're going to overcome the obstacles, and not just affairs, but anything that's gone on in the marriage, it has to be a priority. There has to be that full commitment to making this thing work. And I just thought of this too while we're talking, Cindy. In Christ, he really uses the marriage, as an analogy of our relationship, that he marries us. He's doing all these things. He's 110% committed. He doesn't back off on his love for us. He's not worried about his self-esteem or those kind of things. He doesn't love us out of anger or any of those kind of things. So, the analogy of what the Scripture uses as marriage as an analogy of our relationship with Christ is just kind of the total opposite of everything that we're talking about here.
What about need for variety?
Well,
kind of get bored.
Yeah, again, this is between that sexual aspect of a couple that, do they work at that area of their relationship? And I'm all about, if somebody doesn't want to do something in the bedroom, that needs to be respected. It just does. But, can we work on other things that begin to take place in there? And so, well, I need this variety. Well, I got to try on a lot of different pairs of shoes before I decide which one I'm going to buy. Well, it's so untrue because it's something that's fixable. It's something that can be worked on. There's a lot of good Christian material about the aspect of sex and marriage that's out there that helps couple overcome these kind of things. And if they're not talking about it, if they're not dealing with it, then it can become a rut. It can become boredom. But the belief that I've just got to go have variety, there's something else going on with that person too that needs to be addressed.
And it might be some of these other things behind that, that need.
Yeah, these aren't just cookie cutter issues. These all intermingle. They all overlap each other. You're right about that. What
about just neglect? That's hard.
Well, you think about it. If it's that book by Kevin Leman, and there's a line in the book, the very first part of the book. He says, "Sex starts in the kitchen," and what he meant was, that did you help with the dishes? Did you compliment the cook? Did you help bathe the kids? Did you take out the garbage? Did you clean up after yourself, kind of thing? Because if there's just that total neglect of my spouse, well, you got it all. I'm gonna go watch TV. And in there, does that not build resentment in a person? It does. And then, maybe the husband expects, fulfillment in the bedroom, and the wife's just, feels absolutely neglected.
She's exhausted.
But, if the husband or even the wife are doing all these things to kind of prime the pump, it's more likely to be much more fulfilling for both people instead of a duty by one person and an obligation by one person. But neglect, again, I think it goes back to laziness many times, that, we take that person for granted. We just, it's like the old couple that went to see the preacher and the husband says, well, I told her the day we got married I loved her, and I'll let her know if that changes, You can't go through life like that. So, Neglect is something that's very subtle in nature too. It's not all of a sudden you wake up and you just getting the cold shoulder from somebody. It's very much that subtleness, day in and day out and day in and day out. It's the little foxes that spoil the vineyard. And what does it feel like to be neglected? Have you ever been neglected?
It hurts.
It hurts. Yeah, I've been neglected or overlooked or whatever it may be. So,
I'm reminded, Dick, of Gary Chapman, his book, The 5 Love Languages. When I first read it, it says something like, your teenager runs away. You think, why did they run away? Because I love them so much. But maybe we're not speaking the love language of the teenager, and so they don't feel loved. I think this goes the same way in marriage, and where someone may feel neglected because there's not an education and understanding the love languages of each other.
That's a great
you respond
point.
To that?
Excellent point, because here's the mistake a lot of us make. We tend to love people the way that we like to be loved. My love language is quality time, and Jackie's is not. Hers is acts of service. But if all I want to do is hang out with her, I'm going to drive her nuts. But when I go fill the car up and wash it for her and do the do list for her, I mean, that speaks to her. It speaks to her that I love her, that I care for her. And for her just to come and spend time with me speaks volumes to me that she loves me. So yeah, absolutely point. So you're right. The neglect could come across as we're loving that person in the wrong way. And
it's a good book, 5 Love Languages.
Good show
yeah.
for us to do.
Yeah, yeah. Sexual desire is another motivation.
Well, and this happens in marriage sometimes. I mean, is there something physically going on with the person where the libido is just dead? Happens with age many times. Medicine can cause the side effects. There could be something physically and medically going on with the individual too. And so, but if there's nothing mental or side effects or physical going on with the individual, that they've just lost interest, then there's a deeper problem there. There's something going on with that person, and it might be these other things that I'm angry at them. I don't want to have sex with them. I don't want it to be a time of pleasure. I don't want it to be a time of enjoyment or fulfillment. I tell you, a great book, if you want to look at a good book, is by Doug Rosenau. It's called The Celebration of Sex. And Christian psychologist does a great job of just helping people work through, especially this area right here, when the desire has gone and why has it gone. So it's something to look at if that's happening with me. There's nothing wrong with me. I just not interested in it. Then there's probably something a little bit deeper going on, and it may be these other things that are back up there that we've already talked about.
Yeah, that's good, Dick. What about just the situation?
Well, I call this stupidity.
Okay.
I
can see why.
Had a fight with my wife, went out and got drunk and had sex,
I wasn't thinking clearly.
There's still no excuse for it.
Right.
But situational where, I got to be careful with work relationships because, all of a sudden, I love my spouse, but all of a sudden, there's this attraction going on over here. Situational thing that could be done. Stress can cause it. I'm stressed out and all these kind of things. Again, does not excuse it. We can't point the finger at that. I've got to take full responsibility for my behavior. But there could be a lot going on in a person's life that, would put them in that situation thinking that that's going to solve their problems, when in reality, all they've done is open Pandora's box for a lot more problems in their life.
A lot more pain.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick fix didn't work.
Yep.
Yeah. So what about, Dick, we think about this, when a couple, one of the husband or wife has an affair, do they want to get caught?
I always say that to the person. I said, you probably wanted to get caught, didn't you? And you'd be surprised how many people go, yes. It's a burden off of me. I'm not looking over my shoulder. I'm not paranoid all the time. As crazy as that sounds, because you think, well, aren't affairs very clandestine? Yeah, they are. Aren't they are supposed to be secretive and all this kind of stuff? But you think about people that have affairs, a lot of times they leave a paper trail. There's credit card charges, there's phone calls, there are a number of things that could be paper trails for that person. Sometimes there's that public display of affection. Sometimes there's cards that might be left in the person's glove compartment or something. So, we think that we don't want to get caught, but in reality, because getting caught means what?
That you're not hiding it anymore.
I'm not hiding it anymore,
Yeah.
but it's my way of saying I'm so angry.
I'm mad at you.
Yeah.
Right.
I-
I did this because you didn't fulfill what I felt like you should do.
Those expectations
Yeah.
that were there. All
That's
you've done is
understandable.
try to control me all my life. All you've done is neglect me. You've never helped around the house. You've never done, so it's also that way of them being able to say, this is how angry I am, because maybe even in the past, they've expressed anger, but the spouse, don't worry about it. We need to go to counseling. No, we don't need counseling. I'm dying over here. Well, we'll work through it. Nothing changes at that point, too. And I know, Cindy, people come in, for couple counseling, a lot of times 10, 15, 20 years too late. The disaster has already happened. And they're real hard to fix at that point. Doesn't mean they can't be fixed, but that getting caught many times is a relief for a person. It allows them to express what really was going on inside of them. Now, the person who didn't have the affair, they've got to take a hard look at themselves too. Because believe it or not, the affair is not the issue. If it's not situational where they just, got drunk and did something stupid, which is, again, that's not minimizing that, but the person who didn't have the affair also needs to take a hard look. What drove them to this? Have I been abusive? Have I been neglectful? Have I been overly critical with this person over time? And it drove them to that. Both people, if they're going to fix this, have to look at themselves very, very hard and very, very deep and peel back those things and own their own behavior that maybe caused this.
It's complicated, Dick.
Well, it creates a complicated situation
Yeah, for sure.
when that act happens.
Yeah. And if there's children involved, what does that do?
Well,
that's another show, I guess. But
yeah.
That's hard.
Well, I always tell people when they divorce and they got small ones, I say, you take your pain that you're in right now and multiply it by 20. That's what your kids feel when they go through something like this. And
so you're trying to get back at your spouse, but actually it affects everybody.
Yeah, if it ends in divorce too. There's all kinds of differences, not all kinds, but there's several different kinds of affairs. Probably the worst are emotional affairs because you've bonded with that person, you've connected with that person, you fall in love with that person. It's interesting, only about 10% of affairs people actually say, I love you. That's about how far they go. But you think those are probably the most difficult ones to overcome because when the affair is found out and both parties agree to work on the marriage, the one who didn't have the affair doesn't want to hear this. But the one who did have the affair is grieving. They're grieving the loss of that relationship that they had bonded with that person. Well, they just need to get over it. And the person, like I said, who didn't have the affair, that's the last thing they want to hear, that this person's missing that person or grieving that person. That's why I say emotional affairs are much more difficult to deal with than just one-nighters or short-term sexual affairs, that type of thing. But because, like I said, that bonding has taken place there.
Wow. Sad and complicated.
It is.
And really, the bottom line is if we just treat each other the way we want to be treated. Anyway, so we're going to keep going. And we can make a lot of shows out of this, couldn't we?
We can wrap up with that point, though.
So the cheating aftermath, what is that, Dick? What can we say about that?
The aftermath, let's say a couple decides to work through it. Interesting statistics. Only about 20% of people actually divorce because of the affair. So 1 in 5 actually divorced because of the affair that took place. About another 21% hang in there and work through it and deal with it and go on. I can't remember, it's about 25%, the other spouse never knows about it. And then the rest of them divorce not because of the affair, but because of all the other issues out there. So the larger group of people divorced because of the other issues that were out there over time. You know, they had an affair, but this person doesn't stop their criticism or their neglect or their abuse or anything like that. That's what ends up in divorce more often than not. That's there. So that is the aftermath that begins to take place. Now, and I always say this to couples when they come in when this has been the issue, and they look like, man, I got two heads, but I tell them, I say, this may be the best thing that ever happened to you. This might be the game changer for y'all's marriage. And they think, how? How can this be the best thing that ever happened to us? Well, it brings all this to the surface. It brings the crud, the resentment, the anger, the bitterness, the neglect. All these things come to the surface if they're willing to work through those things. And I've on occasionally had a couple have said to me, it's the best thing that ever happened to us. Not often, but those are the ones that did the hard work. Those are the ones that didn't
help us see truth.
Yep, and didn't sweep it under the carpet. Now, and this brings up a point you were making, Cindy. How do I prevent it? How do I, there's actually, I can't remember the author, but it's called Affair-Proofing Your Marriage. And it's not rocket science. It's what you just said. You know, how does this person want me to treat them? What does that look like to them? You know, I know how I want to be treated, but me treating them may be a little bit differently. When you say, I just want somebody that's kind to me. Well, I know what that means to me, but what does that mean to you? What does kindness look like to you? When I want them to have, be attentive to me. Okay, I know what that means to me, but what does that mean to you? Well, somebody likes attentiveness of touch and sitting next to the person and constantly holding a public display of affection. Well, that's not me. I like different ways of attentiveness. So I got to define, you know, again, I can't love the person the way I want to be loved. I've got to drill down and find out what does that look like for them. And over the long haul, that's how you begin to affair-proof the marriage.
And it really, it does take a lot of work because you have to, as tired as you are and as many things as you are involved in, when you come home, that is truly, my husband used to say, my home is my castle. And I had to figure that out. What did he mean by that? Well, he meant that certain things, you know, for him to make him feel safe and special. And so I had to work on that and figure that out. It took a while, believe me, because we're so opposite. And I think that's the thing. Most couples are opposite of each other.
Many times.
Opposite personalities, opposite love languages, opposite a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So that's got to, and that takes time to figure out how this person wants to be loved.
It does. Because once that intensity is gone, then you got to really figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And then when kids come along,
got to really figure it out.
yeah, because if I'm not careful, kids can become my focus, and there's danger in that. Not that we don't love the little crumb crunchers to death, but, you know, they again, I begin to neglect this person over here. And over time, they're going to go away, hopefully, you know, grow up and move out. And where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us, I don't know this person. I don't like this person that's there. Let me give you a couple of things to do. One is practice acts of kindness on a daily basis. And a couple ground rules. One, you can't buy something. That's too easy. You know, gifts are fine, you know, but do something for the other person. It may be something as fixing their cup of coffee. It may be something as simple as a back rub or cooking their favorite meal or, you know, you cooking dinner for them or, you know, just constant acts of kindness. Not once a week, not once a month, but daily if you can. I mean, just do it. And another exercise that I do for a couple, and then one other thing is don't tell them that you're doing it, you know, because it's not a gift at that point. Well, you didn't even acknowledge what I did for you today, you know. And that's when the pettiness comes in because then it becomes quid pro quo. Well, I did this, you need to do this for me kind of thing. If I give you a gift, I expect nothing in return. That's a true gift. The other thing, and couples love this and kids get into this too, but if you have a whiteboard at home, just for 30 days, write on that whiteboard what you like about that person. You know, because over time, what are they going to write about me tomorrow? What are they going to write about me tomorrow? If you have kids, kids love this kind of stuff. And there's a healing thing that takes place with that. And don't erase it, you know, when you do that. Leave it up there for those 30 days. And you know, sometimes it's repetitive. That's okay. But you don't have to come up with a new word every single time. But what does that feel like? you know. It kind of brings joy to the marriage and joy to the heart. Well, I didn't know you felt that way about me. Oh, yeah, I've always felt that way about you. So, and especially if marriages are hanging by a thread, sometimes these exercises can make it more than one thread. It can make it have a bunch of threads that start to work together.
I love that. It becomes stronger. Yeah. This big thank you. This has been good. And we'll continue on in the next few weeks as we think about different shows, talking about the love languages and maybe some things that can help our families. So we're so glad you joined us today and tonight, whatever time you're watching this.
Keep the cards and letters coming.
Yeah.
Thank y'all. God bless.
Thank you.